myself and my wife Alice, you know, would do that, you know, as a matter of course. I'm sure all parents.
And Nadine, I think lots of people will also say that kids are being taught very carefully and very clearly that they must say no. So little 5-year-olds are told, if anybody wants to touch you, if anyone tells you to keep a secret from your parents, you know, your body is your own personal space. People will say that say no message is out there.
Well, do you know, that's very interesting, because one of the reasons for this is that some of the evidence that I've heard is that if a stronger just say no message was given to children in school, that there might be an impact on sex abuse, because a lot of girls, when sex abuse takes place, don't realise until later that that was a wrong thing to do, because we are getting into a situation now where sex is so common in society. You know, we've got high street stores selling padded bikinis to 7-year-olds. We've got Sheffield NHS Trust giving out leaflets to 11-year-olds in school, which are entitled "An orgasm a day keeps the doctor away." We have situations taking place in schools now in terms of, you know, a teenage magazine last year ran an item on the sexual position of the week for a magazine which is predominantly read by 13-year-old girls. Society is so over-sexualised that I don't think people realise that if we did empower this message into girls, imbued this message in school, we probably have less sex abuse.
Julie, is she right, or is she overstating it? Is she being alarmist? I mean, she's picking out some examples. Do they represent what's really going on?
I think there's several things in there. I think there is an element of moral panic around sexualisation, and I fully accept that there are some very irresponsible retailers that are selling products such as Nadine's talking about, but actually it's few and far between, and they're quite difficult to find. Your mentioning of parents is really important. FPA runs a parenting programme that is about supporting parents to know how to talk to their children about sex and relationships, and the single biggest thing that all of the parents say to us is they're embarrassed to talk to their children about the issue, or they assume their child already knows. And actually, you ask the children and young people who they'd like to talk to them about these things. Most of them say they'd like their parents to. So there's a clash in there, and we do a lot of work with parents to support them about that. I really do want to just talk about young men for a moment, though, because this focuses on young women a lot. And actually, by saying this message is focused at young women, that suggests that it's only young women that are responsible for ensuring that the relationships they have are safe and healthy. And actually, what we need to be doing is teaching our young men that actually it's their responsibility as well. This is an equal engagement, generally speaking, when people have sex with one another, and actually young men are just as responsible. And importantly, young women need to hear that, and young women need to learn that they can expect that of young men. So I think this has got to be about young men and young women. And you asked at the top of the programme whether we don't do good enough at sex and relationships education. Some schools are brilliant at sex and relationships education. They do a huge palette around relationships issues, about confidence and self-esteem, and some are really terrible, which is why for years FPA has been campaigning to have statutory sex and relationships education in the national curriculum, and we haven't yet secured it. But we need that. Our young people need
Let me bring
this.
Ben in on this, because, you know, you are a very religious man. People don't necessarily know that about you, but you certainly are, and I'm wondering about your views on
I really... Nadine, I'm feeling what you're saying. I really agree. I think that there should be an option. I think that there is a lot of pressure on girls, and it's not just peer pressure now. Now the blokes, young boys are putting pressure on girls to have sex, and I think a girl needs to know, young girls need to know that they can say no. And I think if you teach a girl from very young that she can say no, then when she gets to 14 and 15, it's her second nature. She would just say no if she doesn't feel like it, and that I think needs to be emphasised much more. I really agree. It's a great...
I tell you though, you know, you can say no if you want to, but there's also, what about this element, and call me old-fashioned because I am, but you know, you must say no, because if you don't, you'll be in the most terrific trouble with your parents. That was one of the main reasons we ever said no. Exactly. We really wanted to say yes. I always wanted to say yes. I just didn't dare. I was too terrified. I still want to say yes. I'm still scared what my parents will say. You know?
I grew up in the council estate in Liverpool, and you know, the words when you went out the door at night for your parents were, keep your hand over your halfpenny, don't darken our doorstep. You know, you got all this moral kind of instruction, if you can call it moral instruction, from the family. The churches were big in society. You knew who the vicar was, you knew who the priest were. There are none of those moral boundaries there now for teenagers to bounce off. And you know, one of the things about boys and girls is, one of the differences that I've noticed in the groups that I've observed is, girls will talk, and this happened yesterday. Girls will talk and they will articulate and they'll talk through the issue. Boys talk about Man U, Liverpool, rugby, anything, but they don't want to talk about relationships, and they don't want to talk about saying no. And it's the girls whose life opportunities get lost, and not the boys.
What's going
particularly.
on the sofa then?
Simon?
I don't think that's true about all boys. I think some boys want to talk about their relationships, and they might talk about it with their close mates. I think teenagers these days, my personal feeling is they will do whatever they want to do anyway. I mean, I saw a 14-year-old, or 16-year-old boy literally pushing his girlfriend around outside my gym on Monday night, throwing lager all over her, and they were a couple. So if he wants to have sex with her, he's going to have sex with her anyway, that couple, because the respect's just not there. And I just don't think the youngsters these days, to when we were youngsters, they don't do what is that you should have sex at a proper age, or you should wear a condom.
That's probably because they're not being told no.
Exactly.
I mean, if what you're saying, Nadine, comes in, if the bill gets passed, then I think that would give them an option, because that girl's grown up in a generation. I mean, teenage pregnancy is at an all-time high, and they've grown up in a generation where kids aren't, they're not saying no.
Yeah, that sounds even more like an argument, not just for being taught abstinence, but being taught relationships.
Yeah. But that's the
more
key.
than just
absolutely. And good quality sex and relationships education, the key's in the word there, it does already teach relationships, but what we need is for it to be consistently applied across all of our educational settings, and at the moment it isn't, which is why we need to be statutory.
Thanks to you. Thanks to Nadine and Julie, and of course our Sofa Surfers. After the break, Lawrence Delalio, he's talking about moving from the rugby pitch into the kitchen. And now Laurie Reid with some more astrological